Welcome to Aspen Leading Edge. I'm Patty Roberts from St. Mary's University School of Law. Today's guest is Gabe Teninbaum. He's the Assistant Dean for Innovation, Strategic Initiatives, and Distance Education, as well as a professor of legal writing at Suffolk University Law School in Boston. He leads the #1 ranked legal tech program in the nation, as ranked by National Jurist magazine. He also holds appointments as a faculty associate at the Berkman Klein Center for Internet and Society at Harvard University, is a visiting professor at the MIT Media Lab, and a visiting fellow at the Yale School Information Society Project. He's created a technology startup, Spaced Repetition, which was named one of the top 20 legal IT innovations in the world. Spaced repetition is something we use at our school to assist students in learning the material for the bar exam. And you are also the author of Productizing Legal Work, which is an Aspen Publishing publication. We'll talk more about that. Frankly, I'm not sure how you have time to do a podcast interview with me, but thank you for making the time.
Patty, it's a pleasure to be here on the Leading Edge podcast.
Okay, well, let's get started right away. First, one thing that's on my mind recently is Bloomberg Law's inaugural law school innovation program. They picked 10 programs from law schools nationally, as you know, and we were very proud to be on that list at St. Mary's, but Suffolk was on the list as well for their legal innovation and technology concentration. So I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about that first.
Well, it's an honor to be chosen among the other great schools on the Bloomberg listing. Congratulations to you and to St. Mary's for that recognition, Patty. Legal innovation and technology is something that we've thought about for a long time at Suffolk Law. A long time is defined by decades, not centuries. When it comes to legal tech, we started our program in 2013. Our now dean, then Professor Andy Perlman, said, I think the future of legal work is going to look a little different than the present, and we should do something about it. So we created this program that effectively teaches law students what we think the future of law is going to look like, and it prepares them for it. So there are three basic tenets that we teach. One is hands-on use of tools. So we don't just talk about tools, we actually teach people to use tools. So that's document assembly tools and expert system tools and Python programming and use of technology to do neat things like data analytics. The second is we teach those engineering principles like Lean and Six Sigma that have been used for, 100 years in manufacturing, and we teach law students how to use them in a legal context. And then the third thing that we focus on, is the business of law and how the business of law can look different than the traditional sort of billable hour practice. So we group those together in a concentration, our version of a law school major. And we have a number of students that complete the concentration every year. And then we have over 100 students every year who take some piece of it. And we have, these 3 core subject matter classes and 10 or 15 electives so that students can really dive deep on design thinking or, using data to make visualizations, whatever it is that's interesting to them and it's going to help them in their future. So we have wonderful successes, and it's created this really positive feedback loop where students go off, they do cool things in practice, they come back and they tell our students about it, and the next generation grows. It's terrific stuff.
That's awesome. I'm curious, what are the 3 core courses that the students take?
So lawyering in an age of smart machines is the hands-on legal tech class. So that's the one where students learn how to do document assembly. Actually, one of my colleagues, David Colarusso, built a tool that's sort of a gateway drug for lawyers to get into software development. And it's called QNA, the 3 letters, markup.org. Anyone can use it. And we teach tools like Q&A markup, which allows students to create expert systems. And these expert systems can solve real legal problems, and then they can be used as a model for how more sophisticated systems could create more sophisticated problems. So lawyering in an age of smart machines is one of them. The second is legal process improvement and project management. That's taught by an adjunct professor, Catherine McDonough, who's been with us for eons. In her day job, she runs the Legal Lean Sigma Institute and goes all over the country training lawyers and other legal professionals how to use Lean and Six Sigma for law. She comes and she spends time with us. All of the students do a project in class where they do something to show that they know how to do process improvement on a real project. Many of them go on to do a real project in the wild as part of that, part of an internship associated with the class. And then the third and final class is called 21st Century Legal Profession. And again, that's the business model. So we cover everything in the class with the exception of billable hours and contingent fee practice. And we have wonderful guest speakers that come in. We were lucky enough last year to have one of the alums of the class be the first person ever to win for a legal tech product on the ABC TV show Shark Tank.
Oh,
She created
fun.
Hello Prenup. So someone can go on, a couple can go on, they can fill out a prenup form using this app. It costs, a tenth of what it costs to go to a human lawyer, and it gets done in a fraction of the time. So this alumnus, Julia Rogers, was kind enough to come back and talk about that experience of creating a startup and being on TV. And we have a number of people like that talk about just all these different things that they're doing with their legal careers. So this lit concentration, it's exciting because it's just new stuff that people don't get to do otherwise.
It's very exciting, and you're really at the forefront and have been for a long time due to your leadership and the leadership of your dean, Dean Perlman. I find him just a tremendous role model in innovation in law schools. Okay, so I think talking about the products that your students create, the products they're exposed to, other things that they're learning about that might make the practice of law easier or in some ways complicate the practice of law. But using that technology or finding technology that can produce some portion or some aspect of the practice of law is what your Productizing Legal Work book is about, from what I understand. So please tell our listeners a little more about what Productizing Legal Work would teach them.
Productizing legal work is taking a task that was traditionally done repeatedly on a per client basis and then turning it into a tool, typically a software tool that allows many, many people to be serviced at a far lower cost. So let's put some flesh on these bones. People have often heard of LegalZoom. LegalZoom does exactly this. A person that needs to get a bill of sale for their car rather than hiring a lawyer can go onto the LegalZoom website, answer some questions about the transaction, and then get a form that's of good quality and use it in lieu of a lawyer. The effect of this is that the consumer gets the legal services they need through the software at a fraction of the cost. So the question is, can we teach lawyers to do this sort of thing? Can we teach lawyers to make their own tools that can make them scalable so that they can help more people, but they can do it at better cost? And the reality is that it's teachable, and it's a process that can be broken down into a number of pieces. And the pieces look and feel a lot like creating pretty much any startup. You do some market research and you do some testing and you build some prototypes, and then you hone the product, and then you ultimately launch it. There's some other steps in there. But my point is that this can be broken down into a number of steps. So what this book does is it takes the principles that allow someone to go from having a service, writing a contract over and over, and helps them go through the process of turning it into a product that someone might be able to get at a lower cost, or they'd be able to help more people, or the lawyer is able to have a better lifestyle for him or herself. And this is a really cool approach for a few reasons. One is because it helps lawyers first help more people. We're out there to serve the community. We want to get as many people helped as we can. There's a gigantic access to justice gap, and 90% of people don't have access to legal services in some instances. So we want to cut that down. The other thing is that there's this big latent legal market, people that have real cognizable legal problems, but don't go to a lawyer. They just choose not to. It's too expensive. It's too inconvenient. And this can sort of up the convenience factor for clients. It can make it tenable for them to hire a lawyer because these processes make legal services more accessible. Then the third thing that I really like about productizing legal work is, as much as it's framed around startup culture, which sort of connotes profit-driven incentives, is that it can actually be used really, really effectively to serve people at no cost. So if you'll allow me, I'm going to give one example. Our team at Suffolk Law has a LIT lab, the Legal Innovation and Technology Lab. And at the outset of the COVID-19 pandemic, they stopped what they were doing, and they started immediately working on making sure that people who couldn't physically get into courts because they were locked at home were able to fill out the necessary paperwork to get hearings for really, really serious stuff. Abuse prevention orders, children that needed to have some sort of judicial intervention because they were in trouble, runaway kids and that sort of thing, lockout evictions, things where people needed immediate legal services but had no ability to go to the courthouse and get assistance. Our team used this process effectively of productizing legal work and created a series of forums using a team of 200 volunteers from around the world so that people could go onto a website, get information about how to protect their rights, to fill out the paperwork, and actually to electronically file it in the courts. This was all done at no cost whatsoever to the users, to the consumers, but they use this process of productization, of taking this thing that traditionally you'd go to a brick and mortar law firm or legal aid organization, you would sit down with a paralegal or an attorney, they'd help you fill out the forms, and you'd walk into the court, and they made it scalable. In the last 2 years, they've had 20,000 people download and use these forms in our courts. And that's the
Unbelievable.
sort of thing. It's remarkable. And
Wow.
that's the sort of thing that we want to do. So if we can get people to learn these principles, not only can they make their businesses more profitable if that's the goal, but they can also just reach more people. So that's what productizing legal work is about. It's a manual, it's a how-to guide on how to do this, as well as a bit of the philosophy on why one might do this.
So, is this a book that one might use to teach a class to law students? And is it a book that might help someone who doesn't yet know what productizing they'd like to do, um, help guide them in that brainstorming? Or or is it a book for people who already have that idea of that product?
It's a both and. So the intention of the book is to go from somebody who has no knowledge whatsoever to productization to creating a prototype, and with a step-by-step approach. And it's broken up into segments, with each segment being effectively a lesson that has some deliverable associated with it. So it let me give one example. One chapter is about doing market research to see what the competition is, to see how you might be impacted by other products or other ideas. And then at the end of that chapter, there's effectively an assignment that says, okay, here's how you actually go about doing this. Now, here's how you show your work. So with a law school course, it could be implemented because it would be one of the weeks of the 13-week semester. And conveniently, there's a number of steps that mimic the number of weeks in the typical law school course semester. And the other piece of it is, for the person that does have an idea, I speak to a lot of alums and a lot of people that are alums of other law schools who say, you guys are doing legal tech. I wish I had that opportunity. I'm now 7 years into my career path, and I want to try something different. I want to try to build an app, or I want to try to create something using technology. What do I do? What are the sets of steps? And historically, the answer has been that there are a lot of really good sort of general resources out there about creating a startup, but that Venn diagram of creating a startup and creating a startup within the legal sector just didn't exist effectively. And this is my effort to help not just law students, but legal professionals too.
Well, what an exciting project and product. uh,
And product.
End product. Productizing Legal Work. And it was published in 2022 by Aspen. And I'm looking forward to taking a look at it. How convenient that it seems to mimic the semester, number of weeks in a semester.
Isn't that a coincidence? Yeah.
It is a coincidence. So, one thing that is on everyone's mind today, or if it's not, it should be, is ChatGPT. And I thought, having an expert like you, I'd take advantage of this opportunity to ask you, um, gosh, I don't even know what to ask, right? So some of it is ChatGPT's coming out, and it can do outstanding law school application essays, and it can write strategic plans, and it can, I am sure, do papers for students. And what does all this mean to the legal profession and legal education, in your opinion? And what will we see unfold, or what should we be looking for?
I think the answer is it means something. And the follow up answer is I don't know what it means. as someone that's interested in the history of innovation, I think what we can predict is that this will change our relationship with technology and as a result with the practice of law and legal education. When I got my first demo of this product, it was a little bit before the general public did, just because I know enough people in legal tech that someone was kind enough to say, "Hey, this thing is coming. Do you want to check it out?" And I literally didn't sleep that night. I laid back and I thought about all the implications of this sort of technology and what it could mean, and it boggled my mind. And it still does now. So I'm not sure exactly what it means, but I know it'll mean something. One of the theories that I've been working on is that the current way that the legal industry works only works as long as there's a margin for law firms. Put differently, if they can't make enough money to meet payroll, then they will cease to exist or have to change business models. So if you can imagine a tool, and I think ChatGPT might be that tool, that knocks 10% of the billable hours out of the box, because by filling in a few words, you can do the first draft of a letter. It might mean that these law firms go below margin, which totally changes all the dynamics. It forces the law firms to do something differently. And I don't know what the ultimate impact will be on the legal economy as a result of that. And the other thing I don't know, the other axis of this is, I don't know where the technology will go. I think these are very, very early days of understanding large language models. My understanding, again, it's just rumor at this point, is that we're working on, version 3.5 now. And at some point this year, version 4.0 is going to come along. That's going to be an order of magnitude or more powerful than this. So if rather than drafting an effective demand letter first draft, like a paralegal might in 30 seconds, it could draft a novel in 30 seconds. It just changes the way that we interact with it. So it's really, really hard to know where it's going to end up, other than to say that I think it's really going to continue to accelerate, and we just have to keep watch and beware and try to get ahead of it. So yeah, a non-satisfying answer. And I don't know when this is going to air, but the chances are that my perspective and maybe yours will change if it's more than a few days from now than it airs.
Well, it's exciting. It's frightening. It's certainly something that we're going to have to adjust to. And from where I sit, teach our students how to maneuver, work with, benefit from, but also what to be cautious about. I think about, especially access to justice issues. I mean, if the same people that we might build an app for who have difficulty getting to lawyers or courthouses could, uh, create their own legal filings with ChatGPT, that could have tremendous benefits. At the same time, if they are inadequate in a particular jurisdiction, that creates just a time suck on the people who have to review it and then send it back, or clogging the court systems. It's going to be very, very fascinating to see how this rolls out.
One thing I'm really interested to see is how people get trained on how to use this. One of the things that I've noticed and others noticed and have written about is that it's good at some things, like constructing creative and plausible narrative. It's not so good at other things. So it's really, really bad at identifying facts in certain circumstances. There's a piece that just came out. Allison Armstrong, who's a legal writing professor at UConn, just put out a piece. It's on SSRN, where she asked it to do some legal research and asked it for some specific pieces of law. And it came up with a list of citations, just, like a list of sources that you'd expect. They were all wrong, and some of them were made up. So that is really a concern. And then on the other end of things, if you ask it to do something that's narrative driven, if you put the right prompts in and say, write the first draft of a demand letter where I want to emphasize X, Y, and Z, and these facts are present, it does a really beautiful job. So one of the sort of groundswells I'm starting to hear is this term prompt engineer, this idea that what's teachable now is the best type of query to put into ChatGPT, and soon probably its competitors, and which ones are going to lead to confidently wrong answers. Because that's one of the funky things here. If you're doing Python programming and you type in a line of code that doesn't comply with the syntax of Python, you get an error message. There's no error message in ChatGPT. It just gives you an answer. The answer might be wrong. And actually, we had a good time
Yikes.
playing with it at work where we asked it to give us our bios. I'd encourage people to do it themselves. And it would spit back a bio that had like really incorrect pieces of information about our own history. And for some people, it had the ultimate insult. It said, "I don't have enough data to give you a bio." That's the real
Oh my
insult. But
goodness. That's a blow to the ego.
yeah, that's a blow to the ego for sure.
Um, is there anything that you're worried about as far as ChatGPT and legal education and the practice of law?
Sure. One obvious one for me is cheating. I think the way that law professors handle things like take-home exams is going to have to be carefully handled. And that's something that we'll need to think about. Also, things like entrance essays. I mean, I've sat on the admissions committee at Suffolk Law for years. I read the essays, and I think they're important, and I think they say something about the student. I think oftentimes when a student has scores that you might not hope for, a strong essay can be a reason to give them a boost. So that's going to change.
Yes.
And then on the profession end, this idea of the legal singularity. When does the point come where technologies come along that just sweep away so much of the work that traditional lawyers do that it is not economically feasible to be a traditional lawyer, which obviously has pretty significant impacts for legal education, for lawyers, and for society as a whole. I mean, it's a significant thing. So those are the two that get me. For my own future, I think the next 2 or 3 or 4 years, as this technology defines itself, will be a time of challenge to try to stay ahead of it, to try to give colleagues, students, and others meaningful advice on how to surf the wave rather than getting crushed by it.
Is there anybody doing this in legal education right now? I mean, I would come to you if I had a legal technology issue. But who's looking at this? You mentioned Allison Armstrong. Anyone else?
Well, there are some people that are working on it. So Dan Katz and Mike Bomarito just put out a piece where they were able to demonstrate that using this technology, they could pass some of the segments of the MBE. A colleague whose name escapes me at University of Minnesota just put out a piece. Colleagues who are at the Media Lab at MIT working on computational law, they're not in legal education, but they're working in a parallel world, are training folks now on prompt engineering. And then we at Suffolk are quite interested in this. We have people in our lit lab, David Colarusso and Quentin Statehouse, who are working on it. Diane O'Leary, who's my colleague, who I work with on legal tech matters, and Dean Perlman. So our group at Suffolk is very interested, and we'll continue to provide guidance as best we can, both to our students and faculty, but also to people elsewhere as well.
Excellent. Well, my closing question, as you know from your prior guest appearance with me on EdUp Legal, is what do you predict for the future of legal education in the coming decade? And we've talked about a little bit of that, certainly with ChatGPT. But what else do you see coming down the pike in the future?
I think consumers being our students, will demand more flexibility. So I think what you'll see is the success of online first or online only programs, and more law students saying, I want more flexibility in my legal education. One of the things that we do at Suffolk Law is we have a program where students can take their entire upper level program online. And so far, we've gotten really positive feedback. We haven't had a graduating class yet. The proof will be in the pudding after those students graduate and take the bar and get jobs in terms of where their outcomes are, but we're getting positive feedback on that. And I know that's something that you at St. Mary's are pioneering with your program. And I think you'll see more of that because law students will say, well, wait a minute. If I'm on campus 1 or 2 days a week, do I really need to be there for a third or fourth day if that means that it prevents me from working or caring from a family member or spending my time how I want? Can I get value out of my legal education without doing the traditional things? And I think as these programs succeed, which knock on wood, I predict that they will, I think the ABA will be more receptive to more creative programs because this first group of schools that are doing something a little bit different will show that they can be successful. So I think you'll see increasing flexibility and increasing variance in the way that law school programs run because that's what students will want and it will prove that they can succeed.
And do you see more law schools following Suffolk's lead and introducing legal technology exploration into the basic curriculum?
I hope they do. I think it's challenging because not all law schools have faculty members who are deeply steeped in it. So my hope is that first of all, more people will come along who are ready, willing, and able to teach these courses, and that law schools will be receptive either to creating programs like we've done at Suffolk Law, or to integrate training in legal innovation and technology into traditional classes. There's a pretty good argument to be made that you could not have a legal tech program as long as you have someone that will go to contracts class and show students how a smart contracts works. And then they go to Civ Pro class and they show students how they might use analytics to make better predictions about what's going to happen on summary judgment, et cetera, et cetera. If they can weave it in with the program, then it's something that becomes part of the whole as opposed to a separate unit within the law school. The challenge is getting the people within the law schools to do that. The good news is the group of schools that are doing some of this has gone from, 1, 2, 3 to 10, 15, 20. But the hope would be ultimately that it's all law schools. I'll close on this. All the ABA model rules of professional conduct have this basic rule: to represent someone, you have to be competent to handle the case. And they added this comment to that rule a decade ago that says, and that includes being up on relevant technologies and
Right.
taking appropriate decisions based on it. That rule's now been adopted in 40 states. So it's incumbent on all of us in law schools and the legal profession to know about these things, to be responsive to that rule, because it's part of the most fundamental rule of lawyering, which is to say you have to be competent to take on the matters that you're handling. So I hope we can continue to be a part of it, and I hope others will join.
Well, I know you'll continue to be leaders in that, and I look forward to seeing what Suffolk does next. So the book is Productizing Legal Work. It was published in 2022 by Aspen Publishing. This is Aspen Leading Edge's podcast, and you can find us on Apple, Spotify, Google, and Amazon. So I hope you'll listen in to future episodes. And thanks so much, Gabe. Thanks for being a guest.
You're welcome, Patty. It was an honor to be with you. Thank you.